The Canary Islands emerge as breathtaking columns of volcanic rock from the seabed, towering up 4,000 metres. The islands are all a short distance from one another. However, each of them is a unique world in itself, a kind of micro-world. Because of their geographic location, morphology, and great elevation, combined with its proximity to North Africa, the islands offer amazing weather conditions. Not only are the islands quite different from one another, but each of them has an amazing range of weather conditions within just a few kilometers. For that reason, the Canary Islands are said not to have just one climate, but a whole range of different microclimates. The islands are a great place to understand the weather conditions that help us to fly safely. Thanks to the high number of flyable days throughout the year, the islands are a perfect place to learn, progress, and gain knowledge and expertise to become an experienced paraglider pilot. A group of paraglider pilots from across the world with different qualities but all sharing the same passion to explore the Canary Islands and better understand its weather. Coming with proper equipment to make dozens of flights. They will fly hundreds of kilometers across the island with one goal in mind: to better understand the wind and the local microclimate. The Azores anticyclone determines the direction of the wind in the islands by creating a constant northeasterly airflow. This becomes the trade winds blowing across the Atlantic Ocean from Europe towards the Caribbean. Some people say that trade winds are actually born in the Canary Islands, and some call this the wind of the Canary Islands. There are a whole series of northerly facing flying sites that offer good coastal soaring conditions in this northerly trade wind. These are Silver Bridge, Kilometer 13, Los Giles Norte, and Las Coloradas. These takeoffs receive a very clean wind with little turbulence, which makes it possible to fly even in strong winds. The orientation, size, and shape of these mountains enable the wind to move upwards with minimal turbulence, allowing pilots to sky out all day long. Such conditions are ideal for beginner flights. With low altitude takeoffs and broad landings, that make it easy in stable air. Anticyclones or high-pressure centres are found between the subtropical regions and the cooler areas of the planet. The Azores anticyclone usually spreads throughout the North Atlantic and focuses on the Canary Islands. It affects the Canary Islands for most of the year, though it withdraws occasionally between autumn and spring. In winter, it is more inconsistent and moves from north to south depending on the position of the Atlantic Depression. At times when there is high pressure all over the ocean, it usually moves to the north of the islands and the other way round in summer. The high pressure is rarely away for more than a week.
I've just been beginning to fly, so this is a new experience for me. A little scary, but very exciting.
Anytime throughout the year you can find the perfect moment to take a course of any level, as the island offers adequate infrastructure as well as a mild and predictable climate. Learning to fly in a place like this is not complicated. People can take advantage of the good weather and start with the basics before the first flight. We should feel and create those first movements to gain confidence and comfort before being in the air. When the winter approaches, so does the anticyclone, which may be placed on the islands or close to them. This causes the trade wind regime to decrease and disappear. In Gran Canary, this situation allows us to fly on the leeward side or in the higher areas. The intensity of the trade winds varies in relation to the shift of the Azores anticyclone throughout the year. When the distance between the centre of the anticyclone and the Canary Islands is shortened, the pressure gradient usually increases with the isobars being closer together, so the intensity of the trade winds also increases considerably. In winter, the situation is more changeable more than in summer. The centre of the anticyclone often moves to the north and away from the Canary Islands, thereby leaving the islands to the south of the high pressure. In this case, a wind regime with east to southeast component appears, awakening the action of the trade winds, reducing cloudiness and even dragging suspended dust particles from the Sahara. This is due to the fact that the air mass is less humid because of the African influence and the short distance travelled in contact with the sea. When the wind blows from the east, we head to La Laja. Generally, anchored boats help us to identify the wind direction, unless the sea current and waves are too strong. These flying days are usually hot, but the landing is on the beach. On the other hand, the winds are more intermittent in direction and intensity due to the anticyclone oscillation. In summer, the anticyclone moves to the northwest of the Canary Islands, in the Azores, generating more intense trade winds. This also lifts up a sea of clouds, formed by the characteristic stratocumulus, which is massively common in the northern slopes of the archipelago. When the anticyclone withdraws, so does the daily inversion layer, enabling flights of higher altitude. situation is more unstable and development clouds may appear at noon, but the sea of clouds disappears, so the conditions are better for cross-country flights. Some days are really windy, so any help will be welcome. It's necessary to learn some helpful details for very windy days in order to avoid some difficult situations. The great height of some clouds in relation to their surface determines the weather conditions depending on their altitude. A humid subtropical climate, almost permanent in the lower layers, and another one with much more extreme and dry air, almost continental alpine climate in the upper layers. With its high altitude, Tenerife hosts 3 different climate layers: sea humidity blocked in the lower layer, a stable band at medium height, and the typically extreme and unstable mountain conditions in the summit. Another key point to understand flying conditions in the Canary Islands is thermal inversion. It occurs when the anticyclone grows or approaches the island, since the air inside the anticyclones descends or subsides, generating higher temperature caused by increased pressure, thus forming a stable layer where temperature increases with height instead of decreasing. As would be expected, this layer, which ranges between 700 and 1,400 meters, delimits 2 different air currents. Below it, the cool, humid, lower trade wind controlled by the isobars, and above it, the warm, dry, upper trade wind, which flows along the general west air current.
Nos encontramos en el reino de los alisios, dentro del anticiclón de las Azores. Las Islas Canarias están influenciadas el 90% del tiempo por este anticiclón. Tenerife es una isla aerodinámica. Su forma, similar a un perfil, y su orientación en flecha hacia los vientos dominantes del nordeste, desvía el viento creando zonas de remanso y calma que permiten la actividad de parapente durante todo el año.
Tenerife is one of the best places for paragliding free flight practice. Without fear of being wrong, it can be assured that it is one of the places with most flyable days per year on the planet. It is rare to have several consecutive days in which flying is not possible. Actually, during wintertime, there is not such a place in the Northern Hemisphere as far as flyable days for paragliding are concerned. One factor that explains these unusually excellent conditions is the thermal inversion already mentioned. The common feature of the Canary Islands climate is present more than 90% of the time. Inversion, usually of about 3 or 4 degrees Celsius, blocks the connectivity of the lower and upper air masses almost physically, preventing the wind from descending from the summits of the island and sinking again, forcing it to surround the island as it would do with a wing profile. If inversion fades away, that means so does the anticyclone and stormy weather is coming. Therefore, cloudiness increases significantly and rain shows up. The peculiar arrow shape of the island, which is orientated in the opposite direction to the usual northeast winds, produces veering airflow towards the sides of lower layers. This behavior generates diverse, suitable local aerodynamic effects for free flight. The winds of the upper and middle layers are also blocked thanks to the high triangular central mountain range, 2,200 meters of mean altitude, and considerable length, over 40 kilometers, in relation to the total length of the island, which is 87 kilometers. Because of its triangular shape, the perimeter of the island, with three far ends, restricts the Coanda wind effect on the profile, since it is not allowed to turn when reaching them, and it is therefore forced to flow offshore whilst generating calm areas. This explains that under most weather conditions we can always find a place sheltered on the leeward side of the impressive volcanic mountain, a microclimate or bubble of good weather with new visiting pilots find amazing. For paragliding flight practice, three main areas or slopes on the island can be defined: north, east and southwest, and the Anaga Peninsula, the tip of the arrow. In turn, in each zone we can find two flight areas, below and above thermal inversion, which generates distinctive conditions in terrain and climate. Humid weather with variable conditions below it, and dry and sunny weather above it. For this region, local pilots usually talk about coastal flights, mid-altitude flights, and summit flights, although landing on the coast is expected in most of the cases. In light east wind we can fly over the area of Guimar and Fasina, among others. Located in the north is the flight area of the Orotava Valley. Although it is exposed to the wind, the airflow is forced to slow down and move away from the coastal profile of the island, creating an ideal haven for windward flight. There is usually a cloud layer of thin stratocumulus which can get fat under highly humid conditions and produce light rainfall, especially in the first and last hours of the day. The cloud layer and thermal inversion are at the same level. They are dynamic flights, although during the morning the sun may show up, and we can also find conditions for thermals. The best example is La Corona flight in the municipality of Los Realos. With a height difference of 500 to 750 meters, it overlooks the sea, with excellent views of the Orotava Valley and an official launching site on artificial grass. You can fly for hours in laminar and stable air, especially in the afternoon. If the wind increases or there is much cloudiness, it's advisable to fly the southeast slope. It's the best thermal flight area in all of the archipelago. The takeoffs of Ilfonche, Taucho and Los Pinos are usually protected from bad weather thanks to Mount Tiedi. This enables a large number of free flight days, something difficult to find elsewhere. whatever your level, simulating particular conditions in a controlled environment has a lot of benefits. The Atlantic Ocean is known for its strong swell and unremitting wind, so arrangements are essential for coming to Lanzarote. Here, one of the best gliding flights ever will be awaiting the visiting pilots. Because of the action of the sun, the closer the area is to the equator, the warmer it will get. As it gets warm, it expands and rises, so pressure decreases. When the air molecules reach the tropopause, they are forced to head for the poles, whilst lowering temperature in the process. Near parallel 30 degrees, because of the accumulation and temperature, the air comes down again, compressing, heating, and stacking itself, so generally high pressure forms. As a consequence of the Earth's rotation in the northern hemisphere, the wind will blow clockwise in anticyclones. Due to the accumulation of the air, pressure increases in the center of the anticyclone, so the air particles tend to travel down to low pressure, though they get turning inertia along the ice bars. In Lanzarote, this means that most of the time the wind blows from the northeast. The island of Lanzarote has one of the lowest reliefs in the Canary Islands, no higher than 700 meters. Finding reliable days depends on the intensity of the prevailing trade winds on the island, partially in spring and most of the summer, when close high pressures protect the island from depression. The island has a slightly elongated morphology, which happen to coincide with the direction of the trade wind. This circumstance will cause great acceleration of the wind in the slopes facing east and west. The entry point of this movement will be located at Orzola, which is usually the least windy area. When September comes, pilots are encouraged to start a new flying season. At this time of year, the wind direction will be variable and its intensity can be reduced significantly. We will enjoy days with high visibility and thermal inversions higher than usual, which will allow us to fly up to 900 meters and even 1200 meters at the level of cloud base on most occasions. This figure is unlikely to be higher.
I enjoy flying for the simple reason that I don't have to think about my normal life. It's a way of getting away and not thinking about anything else except nature and the will to stay up in the air. Me gusta volar en Canarias porque no hace frío. En Europa hace mucho frío y aquí no.
When high pressures move far away, the whole island becomes unprotected at the mercy of the action of fronts or storms that occasionally approach the Canaries. When they do not fully reach the island, we can still find a flying site. Lanzarote offers some low takeoffs that allow us to fly. With most other sites it would not be possible. That's the case for El Cuchillo, a crater located almost at sea level in a most exotic scenery. The first thing we should know is that turbulence is proportional to the square of the wind speed. Therefore, if the wind speed doubles, turbulence quadruples. Imagine you forgot connecting your trouser legs. Raise both legs behind the risers and try to propel yourself into the harness. When it's safe, sit down and fasten your belt as soon as possible. You're in trouble with the brake. It may be just stuck. Grab the control line over the pulley and apply half of the brake that you would normally use. If you have completely lost the brake control, use the back risers. Pull them back. Don't pull them down. The island of La Gomera is well known for its rugged terrain. It's occupied by abrupt valleys and ravines originated on the centre of the island that spread out radially to the coast, flowing into and around the coastline. It is this geographical layout that explains its squeezer shape. La Gomera is surrounded by the island of Tenerife to the east and La Palma and El Hierro to the northwest and southwest. This geographical situation, close to the neighbour islands, determines the influence of the prevailing winds on the island. This is due to the changes both in wind speed and direction generated by the nearby island of Tenerife and its northwest far end in the shape of a vortex, which is, in short, the prevailing wind regime on the island of La Gomera. La Gomera offers a windward slope coincident with its northeast side and a clear leeward slope in the southwest of the island. It is on this side where the breezes originate. The sea breeze is formed because during the day the Earth's surface tends to get hotter sooner than the sea surface. On a sunny day, this difference in temperature between the two air masses warms up the Earth much more than the ocean, thus generating a small area of low pressure. The air rises as the Earth warms it up, and the cooler air above the sea occupies the space left by the warmer air that has risen above the ground. Therefore, the air masses move because of the difference in pressure, whether on a large scale in the case of atmospheric cells, or on a half scale for anticyclones and storms, or on a small scale for breezes. In meteorology, this horizontal movement is called advection. On our scale, it is perceived as wind. The leeward side of the island, orientated to the southwest, offers a calm wind scenario for the most part of the year. The powerful slopes and cliffs orient so that the wind direction behave as real heaters as they are affected by the sun from midday onwards, especially during winter, generating a thermal field even without much atmospheric instability. The slopes of the Valle de Gran Rey municipality are usual flying courts in the leeward of the island. Land breeze is the total opposite phenomenon to sea breeze. At night, the land surface cools faster than the water surface, which maintains its temperature better. The cool flow from the land is forced to fill the space of the warmer flow over the sea, which rises as temperature increases. Therefore, the land breeze is a flow from the water to the land, whereas the sea breeze is a flow from the land to the sea. In the south of La Gomera, the experience is really good for hike and fly lovers, since the takeoff sites in the area of the island are suitable for these activities. In some cases, because it's worth the experience to hike in that scenery before flying. In others, because it is an inaccessible place that can only be reached on foot. In fact, La Gomera is shown as a paradise for hikers. After midday, the breeze can settle in the leeward, so soaring is feasible almost until sunset. It should be noted that the island is not high enough to stop the windward that rushes through the summit most days. The leeward thermal condition prevents the wind from sinking and behaves as a real lid, so the risk is not high when flying is restricted to the leeward slopes over the sea, and it keeps sunny in the afternoon. If clouds grow too much and cut insulation for a while, the thermal breeze decreases and the windward airflow can approach the sea. The visiting pilot must be very careful. When in doubt, you must give up, even when you have to walk a long way back, since it is easy to find strong outflow from the windward at the top of the ravines and upper plateaus in this part of the island.
Lo bueno de las Islas Canarias es que tiene esa combinación de acantilado, de playas de arena, playas de roca, montaña. Tiene mucha variedad de distintos tipos de vuelos. Llevo volando 15 años aproximadamente. Empecé con unos amigos en una pequeña ladera en el pueblo y cuando vi que eso me gustaba, entonces me entró como un veneno en el cuerpo y no he dejado de volar en estos 15 años nunca. Volar es un paseo por el aire, es un balcón en el cielo. Lo que más me gusta de volar es la sensación de libertad y la perspectiva a la que puedes ver una zona determinada desde el aire, porque viajas, ves un paisaje a nivel del suelo y es bonito, pero cuando lo vuelas es doblemente bonito.
The north coast of the island offers powerful slopes and steep cliffs exposed to the dynamic windward airflow, facilitating dynamic flights with moderate force for lower slopes and weak force for higher slopes. With a light wind regime and some degree of sun from the mid-morning onwards, the slopes behave as thermal slopes with the help of unstable weather at high level. In the ravines flowing downstream into the windward coastline, it's easy to find venturi effects that cause considerable wind acceleration inland towards the ravines or valleys. The effect is especially reinforced in the constriction that usually occurs downstream, so flying inside it becomes risky for the safety of pilots. The white curls in the sea, known as white breakers or white horses, reveal the presence of strong wind. When they show up in the sea, the wind is expected to reach 20 kilometers an hour in the place where they're observed. In calm sea, they show up a bit later. In a takeoff, there is always more intensity. The higher the sight, the more intense the wind. You can also expect stronger wind during a boxed-in landing. You need abilities to interpret the white horses. The closer to their verticals, the less visible they are. And as light fades, they also like to hide. This situation requires launching the parachute. Grab both brakes with one hand. Reach the parachute handle with your other hand and simulate launching it. It's really important to make this movement automatically. This process is divided into two stages. First, take the container out of the harness, and second, launch it with a throw. Unless you throw it strongly, the reserve may not come out of its container. Jerk it strongly. If you do not do it strongly, once again, the reserve may not come out. Jerk it strongly. Fuerteventura means strong wind. It couldn't be more accurate. But on those rare occasions when the Azores anticyclone approaches the island, calm reigns. So many planes and its lunar scenery make paramotoring a pleasure. Actually, this type of flying can be practiced with wind, as there are lots of landing sites and general conditions are stable. However, it may pose a challenge to foreign pilots. When two air masses coming from opposite directions meet, convergence takes place. This phenomenon produces a local increase in atmospheric pressure, which must be re-established at once, and the only way for the excess wind to go is upwards. So there is general ascent at the meeting point of both air masses. This effect is produced when the opposite air masses bear in significantly opposite wind directions. Otherwise, if they meet a very open angle, a wind shear or wind cut will be originated and they will meet at a very closed angle. Confluence will start like two adjoining rivers. In all these cases, the rising movement will be weak or even absent. Though convergence may be due to different causes, all of them result in significant ascent of the air masses. When convergence takes place, thermal and dynamic rise is also reinforced.
Lo que me gusta en volar es la sensación de tener la libertad de ir por cualquier sitio donde quieras. Tener este feeling, esta sensación de estar encima de las nubes, encima de todo, ver todo como un pájaro, y si quieres un vuelo tranquilo, lo haces un vuelo tranquilo para relajar, y si quieres adrenalina a tope, lo puedes tener eso también. Es todo tridimensional, lo puedes ir para arriba, para abajo, a donde quieras, y eso es lo más que me gusta, y además la sensación de estar en la natura fuera y tener estos paisajes aquí en Canarias.
Fuerteventura is a favourable island for such an interesting phenomenon for free flight. Thanks to its elongated narrow shape, its shores on the east and west sides that are longer than the north and south, its mountain backbone that runs along the north and south of the island during the morning, following the solar shift, an east component breeze line goes into the island, and vice versa in the afternoon, a west component is present. When these air breezes meet, convergence will occur. If there is light to gentle wind, especially east and west component airflows, convergence will occur during the central hours of the day. On blue days, the area of high activity will be marked by a well-defined line of cumulus. On cloudier days, cumulus clouds will tend to develop more than the others and will show a darker base. If the day is completely cloudy, the phenomenon will be very weak or non-existent, since local breezes are generated by the sun. With north and some west component gentle wind, the conditions are perfect for coastal flying. Once again, the unique scenery and the laminar flow hitting the dunes are unrivaled, and people can spend hours enjoying flying in the air. Unlike the other islands, Fuerteventura is outstanding because of its low altitude relief, lower than 300 meters for 75% of the territory. This prevents orographic rainfall as well as big changes in weather conditions on the whole island. In contrast to others, the low altitude also causes the wind to move all over the island and rush inland, reaching the south coast with high intensity. Windmills always provide clues about the wind, since they rotate clockwise and they face the wind. Although there are many exceptions. People sometimes get deceived by the speed of the turning blades of a mill. as they have variable pitch. They could turn with less wind and vice versa. But in any case, the leeward side of a spinning mill is a very turbulent sight. In exceptions, where the mills turn without facing the wind, its revolutions are much slower than usual. Let's try with a front collapse. Grab the A-lines, then pull them down strongly. Hold on. Release. Place your hands at the height of the carabiners. Let's try with a full stall now. Normal flight position. Start to brake gradually. Maximum pressure on the handles and the wind breaks. Raise your hands immediately up to the same level as the carabiners. Once the wing is under control, put your lines right up and let it fly again. La Palma is a remote little paradise for paragliding. It's amazingly diverse. You can take off from a forest, fly over lunar scenery, and finally land on a beach.
Yes!
The island is heart-shaped. The prevailing wind is northeast 70% of the days, and the southwest side of the island is sheltered from main winds in the leeward, thus generating its own microclimate. When the wind meets the island, depending on its component, one part of the airflow is forced to pass over the relief, and the other has to get away towards the far end of the island. Thus, initial speed triples. When the usual wind component, termed as northeast trade wind regime, occurs, one part of the airflow is forced to rise over the east slopes of the island. Being a humid wind, it will condense on its way up and will meet the part of the airflow which is already blowing at that level, moving clouds closer. From early morning, this will cause the east side of the island to be saturated with clouds which are trying to move over the summit. However, at this altitude, the trade wind thermal inversion places a lid on cloud development, usually between 900 and 1,300 meters of altitude, and the summits are over 2,000 meters high. As a result, wind and clouds must get away towards the northwest and southeast far ends. Only in the center of the island there is a 1,200 meter high trough, usually occupied by the powerful trade winds. But since the west side of the island is sheltered in the leeward and it is usually sunny, a thermal breeze will soon generate. After colliding with the trade wind, the thermal breeze with strong rising component will force it to fly over the thermal bubble and get away towards the ocean a couple of miles offshore. The remaining outflow at the extreme ends will meet and continue in the southwest direction, together with the remaining wind in the area. Although one part of the airflow will turn into strong breeze to foster thermal activity in the leeward, especially near getaways or cut winds associated.
Lo que me gusta de volar es la sensación de libertad que sientes en el aire. Volar en las Islas Canarias es impresionante, es una de las mejores sensaciones que puedes tener y te permite volar 300 días al año, que eso pues en muy pocos lugares del mundo puedes hacerlo. Recomiendo a la gente que se anime a volar porque es una de las mejores experiencias que va a pasar en su vida y que es una maravilla.
This rare system of leeward breezes, return breeze, Föhn effect, Venturi effect, does not always behave in the same way. If there is heavy rain at the summit, the Föhn effect will get more intense, and this will finally become risky in most parts of the usual flight sites. When inversion is very high, above 1,400 meters, the sheltered area is reduced, and many clouds reach the leeward side, thus reducing insulation. This will further weaken the leeward thermal breeze, main pillar of the network. If there's no rainfall or rain is not visible, the leeward wind is much more reliable and predictable, although in certain areas some weather wind may be originated if clouds cut insulation or sunshine for a few hours, or if high cloud layers prevent the heating of the earth since morning. La Palma offers a network of official takeoff sites easily found on the internet. They are also well marked with informative panels. Flying is possible both on the windward and the leeward side all year round. Windward flights will be influenced by wind direction and terrain height. For dynamic flights in light wind, we will have to get closer to the vertices of the island to find sufficient intensity, or to the high takeoffs of the island. In strong wind, we must avoid those areas and use central areas where initial windward speed can be significantly reduced, even up to half its speed, because of compression, ascension and outflow, which behaves as a wind drain. Clearly, the island is not suitable for risky cross-country flights. Local knowledge and good judgment are always very important. In any case, the amount of safe, flyable days is certainly high. On the leeward side, the situation is completely different. Thanks to the amazing takeoffs and unequalled scenery. La Palma is the highest island in the world in relation to its perimeter. It is a huge volcanic building emerging from the seabed up to more than 2,000 meters, so the leeward side is excellent. In general, leeward flight is not advisable. However, in the Canary Islands it is common and it can be done safely if you are properly informed. La Palma is a biosphere worldwide reserve. A high percentage of its surface has some kind of natural protection. So if we intend to use a particular takeoff or landing site not belonging to Cabildo, the official network, it is important to find out if it is allowed by the island's governing plan. The windier it is, the better your technique should be. Although there are many different ways to lift a wing, using just one riser and a cobra technique is the best way. As it is very windy, a takeoff which would normally be non-turbulent may be turbulent now. If that is the case, it's better to exaggerate the maneuver until you get the so-called cobra effect. On occasions, because of turbulence, there is no other choice. If you need help, everybody must know what they're doing. If you are progressing slowly, fly away from the mountain at half bar. And get the other foot ready on the second bar. But landing is still to come and the situation could turn out to be extreme. The ability to free yourself from the glider is a maneuver every pilot should know. Put this into practice in a controlled situation Use one of your hands to undo the carabiner and the other to open it and set yourself free. Let's do a sat now. Start deep spiral. To enter the sat, push one riser and pull the opposite brake. Before entering the spiral, a lot of weight shift. Then brake. And before entering the spiral, exaggerate the brake and exaggerate the weight shift. Always hold the outer riser properly. Weight shift, brake, hold on, and enter the sat. To exit, release the brake fully. Center your body at the same time. Brake with both hands until you manage to stop the surge. Raise your hands and exit. Helicopter. Deep stall. Pull the brake until the wing enters the deep stall. At that moment, raise your hands. One of them completely up. The other one stays with a bit of brake. Turn. Let your body fall wherever the harness asks for. Don't fight against it. This is good to keep the helicopter in the center. To exit, brake the outer side of the turn. Release the wing and let it fly. No doubt, El Hierro offers some of the most consistent slopes for paragliding in the world. Furthermore, the Gulf area is a valley that produces the most powerful thermals in the Canary Islands. So both types of flights are feasible almost all year round, generating high-level flight conditions. About a dozen approved takeoff sites. There are also many other sites which are not approved but allow easy takeoffs. Depending on the wind direction, wind intensity and cloudiness, the pilot can choose one or the other. Among Canary pilots, it is common to use the word outflow, which describes the phenomenon known as the Venturi effect. This is actually an important and well-known effect in wind fluid dynamics. In other countries or areas, it is termed as flow compression, funnel, or jet. In a nutshell, it is a particular amount of fluid is forced to pass through a narrow constriction. It will have to accelerate to prevent the total fluid volume from decreasing. When the meteorological wind meets the island of El Hierro, it is compressed between the rising terrain and the inversion layer, with the consequent increase in speed. The wind will escape through its vertices at a higher speed than it was when it was approaching the island. We must beware of this outflow points. They are easily visible in the sea, delimited by areas with wind blowing in different speeds and different directions.
Bueno, de volar lo que más me gusta es que ha sido una sensación nueva, completamente nueva. Es como aprender algo que no sabes qué sensación te va a transmitir, pues fue lo mejor que me ha pasado en la vida. Llevo 12 años volando, empecé cuando tenía 25 años, empecé en la Isla del Hierro y ha sido el principal causante de tantos bienes en mi vida. Lo que le diría a la gente que no vuela es simplemente que por una vez en la vida dejen de pensar en que hay peligro y lo prueben, que seguramente va a ser lo que les atrape, igual que me atrapó a mí, y será nuevos pilotos seguramente.
Paragliding over the vertices of the island is risky since the outflow may launch you towards the sea without any possibility of coming back down. Visible to the naked eye, the borderline between wind and calm, known as cut or shear, limits two distinct areas. One area where the wind moves at high speed offshore and another sheltered calm area. It is very important to learn how to identify them because flying too close to the cut wind can be dangerous. The sea is the best indicator, although clouds can also reflect the outflow area through bright spells, roll clouds, broken and scattered clouds. At ground level near the wind cut or wind shear, the breeze usually originates in the opposite direction of the outflow, very often in the completely opposite direction. Flying over this area is very dangerous activity if the pilot is not familiar with the phenomenon. But it is something that local pilots do very often. We should get advice from them so we can enjoy to take advantage of these special conditions. The aerobatic pilot can hardly find a better place for this paragliding flying type, with takeoffs that are over 1,000 meters high for smooth descents and walls that are over 800 meters high for a whole day flight. Few places on the globe offer such good conditions to carry out so many maneuvers in a day. northeast wind blows in from southwest Europe and ends up in the Canary Islands. This is the wind which has taught us to fly and to learn so much about the air. This even crosses the whole Atlantic, ended up in South America. Let's watch this wind as it leaves our archipelago and drifts off into the sunset.